Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. She streams the show live on Facebook on the last Tuesday of every month at noon Eastern. Get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn. And you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I am so excited about our guest this week, Maggie Staub of Parallel Learning. And Maggie, tell us about your company and what you do.
Well, thank you. Really excited to be joining you today. My name is Maggie Staub. I'm the head of education and provider operations at Parallel Learning. Just a little bit of background about me. I'm a longtime educator and a learning specialist of about 10 years or so. So most of my career really started in New York City, working in both public and private schools, including an international school. And I've worked with students in various capacities from anywhere from pre-K to about 10th grade. But right now, I left the classroom about a year ago to work with Parallel Learning. It was a natural transition for me because I really was blown away by their mission to make learning support services more accessible to families. And essentially, that's exactly what we've been doing. The past year has been very busy for Parallel. We offer a variety of different services, such as private full comprehensive learning evaluations, executive function coaching, and skills-based learning support. We also have now expanded to reach those who need speech and language therapy services and therapy and mental health counseling services. And so we're fully virtual, and there's a lot of ways that we're working towards building and providing more access to families and students to get these services.
Wow. And I was so excited to hear about you guys because I know down here in Maryland and DC, it is so hard to get services and to get evaluations. Tell me more about the evaluations. What, are they full comprehensive? Are these ones that a family could go to a school with to get services?
That's such a great question. So our private evaluations are just as comprehensive as any type of in-person evaluation that you could get with a clinical psychologist. So we use clinical psychologists to perform them. They, have personalized assessment plans that they develop based on what the students' areas of concerns are, and essentially like what a family might be wondering about in terms of their learning profile. And the way that we sort of do this is we've built sort of a testing team around them. We have care coordinators that sort of walk the family through the assessment process, which can be, pretty overwhelming for some. We have, really highly trained test technicians who perform the actual testing to ensure that we are following all the APA guidelines for teleassessment. And it's really personalized. Every student's journey looks a little bit different with us, but we have a support system that sort of helps the family through the process. And also our goal is to answer the questions that they have about their child. And just like any private evaluation, families can use this to try to obtain services. It really kind of depends. Taking it to a public school might look a little bit different. Every kind of district has its own way of incorporating a private evaluation in the development of an IEP. Of course, we can't guarantee those types of accommodations, or we can't guarantee a diagnosis of any sort. But similarly, even with type of private education programs, most schools will require some type of documentation before they put a learning plan in place. And for us to be able to make, really specific recommendations on how to support a child's learning, most of the time parents can use this to sort of advocate for their child and get those accommodations in school.
That's so wonderful. And so I wanted to go into a little bit about like the cost. Like, do you guys take insurance? because I know that's one of the biggest things is parents are like, the school won't evaluate and I can't afford to pay this. What does it look like with you all?
That's a conversation I've had lots of times with families, and a huge reason why I didn't think anything could take me out of the classroom, but a huge reason why I felt so tied to their mission is that the cost is a flat fee for us. So it's $1,500 for the entire evaluation. And, in a lot of places to compare, I mean, I taught in New York City, so I was hearing prices of $4,000 to $10,000 for an evaluation.
Same in
Um,
DC.
yes, and of course that can vary and it can be unknown, whereas ours is a flat fee regardless of how much testing is needed. And kind of going back to that personalized testing piece, there's a lot of cases where an evaluator will need more information about a child's learning and need to really kind of dig in a little bit deeper. We don't add on any additional fees for that. We don't add on for the service of having a care coordinator help the family walk through the process or anything. So we offer one flat fee. At this time, unfortunately, we're not accepting insurance. However, we do provide families with a really extensive and really clear guide that walks them through how to try to obtain out-of-network coverage. We provide a super bill that provides them with the CPT codes that they might need and can take it to their insurance and see if they can get some out-of-network coverage. And in a lot of cases, our families have at least been able to get some part of their evaluation costs compensated.
That's great. I'd love to hear that because it's so needed, especially for, the population that might not even have insurance that would cover it, or even with insurance that they don't cover it all. So I know you went into services. Do you require, like if somebody comes to you for an evaluation, do you require them to get services through the program?
No, not at all. So they can be used, our services can be kind of used separately depending on what a family's needs are. Or, I mean, what we really do is we see a lot of benefit between kind of keeping a student within our system to obtain services after an evaluation. So if a family just wants to come to us and get answers about their child's learning, or maybe a diagnostic conclusion for their child, they can just get evaluated through us, and we'll still make recommendations regardless of what their long-term plan is. The one thing that makes our reports really unique is that there are sections within the report that really explains to the family what it is exactly that we're evaluating. What does this look like for your child? How does it impact them in school? How does it impact them at home? And then in terms of our recommendations and our accommodation section, we really detail out exactly what we're recommending in the classroom setting, in a testing setting, and the types of interventions that may be beneficial to the child. We offer a lot of those services, so it's really wonderful when parents can take advantage of the opportunity to then carry on with parallel and maybe obtain executive function coaching, because then our providers actually within our network have the ability to create a team approach around this student and really have access to each other to build an appropriate learning plan and really work through the child with utilizing the best strategies that would work, best for them. They don't have to though. If we have families that come directly to us and just want the executive function coaching because they know it's something that their child needs, or they're wondering if it's a benefit to them, they can absolutely still receive that same service.
That is so awesome. And so I know you're in New York and I'm in Maryland, DC area. Does it matter? Like, are you limited by where your psychologists are licensed on who you can service and evaluate?
That's a really great question. So because we do use clinical psychologists, we certainly can only serve families within the states that we have providers licensed in. I would say at this point, we really are spanning most of the US, which is really exciting. And we also have a variety of psychologists that have something called a PsyPact license, which essentially is a type of clinical license that allows them to serve, I think it's about, don't quote me on this, it may be 28 or 29 different states that are PsyPact states. So we do have expanded licensure across the US, but yes, that is a requirement for the evaluation piece. When it comes to executive function coaching or our skills-based tutoring types of services, there's no requirement there because it's not a clinical service.
And it sounds like from your mission and what you're talking about is if a client were to call you and need an evaluation and not currently covered, you would find a way to get it covered, right? Like potentially get a provider.
We would help them as much as we possibly could. Absolutely. And like I said, we really tried to provide a lot of guidance around that. And in some cases, there's insurance isn't able to cover it. They may get denied. And in a lot of cases, they have to pay. They have to pay out of pocket. And that's usually something that happens afterwards. We do offer payment plans, though, to really help families who are in need and maybe, maybe not have the full resources to go about it all at once.
That's great. So I know here in a lot of the school systems that I've worked with, when we bring in private evaluations, sometimes the school will say, well, you didn't get any input from the school. Mm-hmm. Are you able to do that to get, like, I know the Connors or the BASC checklists? Do you send that to school teachers?
Yeah, I would say typically most of our testing batteries include a teacher report, maybe even a few, depending on what exactly that we're evaluating the student on. And we very much so will ask families permission to be able to utilize teachers that are directly working with their child to provide feedback for our evaluations.
Oh, that's wonderful. So it's full comprehensive. You got everything in there that I would need to help a family get in and get an IEP services.
Yeah. We really try to look at the whole profile of the kid. As an educator, it's so important to really understand different parts of a child's learning profile because, maybe their cognitive and academic functioning clinically and maybe even on paper looks okay. Or is as expected compared to their age group. But we also assess for the attention piece and the executive function piece and even their social emotional well-being, because those pieces can really impact a child's learning. They can really be the reason for the lack of performance that a teacher or a parent is noticing. And until we really understand what the root cause of what a child's struggling with, everyone's going to be kind of guessing as to like how we can help this child rather than really knowing what is important to tackle first.
That is so awesome. And I know you said you do a flat fee. So if you get in, like, if the care manager talks with the family and determines, okay, these are the evaluations, if something happens in the evaluations that it looks like you need to dig deeper, are you able to do that?
Absolutely. So essentially, when families come to us, they really always start with meeting with a member of our care specialist team. They're just incredibly knowledgeable. They'll really help talk with the family and ensure that, they're kind of going about the services that they're looking to acquire. From there, when a family is ready to get started, a care coordinator will get them set up with, obtaining their paperwork and getting them all of their forms completed. And then their first session is actually with a clinical psychologist. So that we call that our clinical interview. The family will attend, depending on the child's age, they'll attend for part of it. And that's when they're really going to kind of dig in deep with the developmental history and be able to discuss what some of the presenting concerns are. And then once the clinical psychologist develops the assessment plan from, all the documents they review in that conversation, the testing begins, and there's really, really close look from the psychologist and the psychometrist together to see what's happening and what the data is telling us in live time. If we need to dig deeper, we go ahead and we schedule that. We do not charge extra for that. It is our goal to obtain as much data as possible to be able to give families the answers that they're looking for. So, it really kind of depends. We're also very flexible in terms of the actual testing sessions themselves. Some students, in terms of their pacing, need shorter sessions or they need more frequent sessions that are a little bit more to their pace. We're very flexible with that, and it does not impact the cost.
That is great. So you used a term that I haven't heard often, psychometrist?
Yes, they're part of our testing. Yeah, psychometrist is essentially a test technician, somebody who's incredibly experienced with diagnostic testing and administering them diagnostically and virtually, because all of our services are virtual. They're very in tune to ensuring validity within the testing process. Because of course, it's just a different type of environment than being in person. We have to send a test kit to the family that includes testing booklets, and there's a lot that we need to do to ensure security and validity within, the test records that we complete and things like that.
Great. But it's all overseen by the psychologist that reads the report and
Absolutely.
does everything.
Absolutely. And most of our psychometrists, they have even more experience with the testing actually, because they're in, typically they're in doctoral programs or they're looking to obtain, and a lot of them are also school psychologists who potentially do testing regularly as well.
Oh, that's great. So what's the certification difference? Like, why are they not considered a psychologist if they're doing testing in schools and have their doctorate?
That's a great question. For private evaluations, when you use a clinical psychologist can determine a DSM diagnosis, where a school psychologist only works within the school district and are more familiar with like internal diagnostic codes for schools. And in some school systems, they don't even offer a diagnosis. It's more about qualifying or disqualifying a child for services. So they're not really trained in really looking at, holistically, in general. I don't want to speak for all school psychologists, but in general, they don't have the licensure to be able to offer a DSM diagnosis.
And I hear that often. The school's like, we don't diaggnose. We can't say they have ADHD. We can't say they're on the spectrum.
And sometimes that piece is so important for a family to understand, right? Because our evaluations kind of go beyond just looking at a child's academic profile and performance within the school district. Some are really looking for answers about like who their child is and like really kind of wanting to get a sense of if there's a diagnosis, like how do I really support my child here, and sort of help advocate for them.
And that's, I know with schools, when parents feel that something's not working,
Mhm.
a lot of times schools were like, well, what disability code do you want us to look at? And parents don't know. I mean, like, I don't know. It's just something's not working. My child is struggling and doesn't seem like it should. Do parents need to know anything other than my child is struggling to come see you?
Not at all. I mean, that's really what the role of our clinical psychologists. They do an incredible job, and I'm not just saying that because I work for Parallel. This is a provider network that goes beyond what I've actually experienced as an educator. Our mission has also been to be educators in this space. So when a family comes to us and they, go through the testing process, after the testing occurs, they have a feedback session with the clinical psychologist again, so that they're sitting down and the psychologist is walking them through the entire report and then walking them through what a potential learning plan roadmap could look like and explaining to them, this is what this means for your child. This is why this might look this way at home. That there's a whole opportunity for them to educate the parent on what they need to know or what they want to know in terms of supporting their child and what's potentially going on. And I think the thing that's wonderful too is that we allow additional access as much as needed. Some parents, and often parents, will ask for additional follow-up sessions because they implement some of the strategies and they're seeing progress and they kind of want to know, okay, well, this is looking like it's going in the right direction. What can I do next? Or should I stay in my, should we stay with this plan and how much longer? And they need more guidance. It can't just be, here's a document that tells you a bunch of information about your kid and now you're kind of on your own to figure out what to do with it. We offer that extended support throughout. And again, if families come to us with, obtaining some of the services after, so if they're working with a learning specialist, that learning specialist has access to the documentation. That learning specialist has, access to the family to ensure that they're providing, adequate feedback in terms of the child's progress. And we have a network of providers that collaborate with each other. So they're sharing best practices and best strategies all the time to ensure that they're really meeting the needs of their students.
That is so wonderful. And I know you said something about documents. I know, I mean, special education documents are, stacks and stacks and stacks. I'm trying to bring my law firm paperless, and I'm actually succeeding somewhat. Surprisingly, I swore up and down we could never be paperless because the amount of paperwork that you have in special ed, but I've managed to do it. COVID kind of forced us. What if a parent just doesn't have all the education documents and all of the stuff that they might need? Is that a problem?
I mean, no, not really. Whatever they can provide to us that's helpful in terms of evaluating their child and telling us information about what has been sort of documented about them in the past is always helpful, but not at all required. I think, one thing that we tend to forget too is that while that information can be really helpful, the goal of actually, completing a full evaluation is to be objective as possible. Our clinical psychologists, that's their goal, is to really look at data, look at, what is being shared, what is being documented by the family. And sometimes there's even like a student report where the child is sharing their own reflection of themselves within the process. To maintain that objectivity is really a goal, and really allows us to ensure that our results are valid. So, kind of going back to your point, if a parent has had an IEP in the past, or has gone through a private evaluation in the past, and they choose not to even share that, that does not impact our ability to still tell them what their child's, abilities are and their current level of cognitive functioning is at this point in time.
That's great. Except for the one thing is if the evaluation is given within 12 months of each other. I think it's the Woodcock Johnson and the Whisk.
Oh, yes. Well, in that case, yeah, well, yes, of course. I mean, if they don't share that with us, kind of hard to determine what that testing battery would look like. If they did provide to us, an evaluation that was within that time frame that you mentioned, we do have an extensive assessment library where we could do the alternative assessment to ensure that, we're, following best practices in that way.
And if the parents don't know, if they say, well, the school assessed, but I don't know what assessments they did, can you help the parents to get the copies of those reports
Absolutely.
and assessments?
Absolutely. And typically it takes, nothing more than, helping the family feel empowered to go back to the school and understanding their rights, that they're entitled to that documentation, and really just requesting that documentation. And if they needed additional support, our team is, more than welcome and more than happy to go ahead and try to facilitate those conversations. Thankfully, we really haven't experienced much of those types of situations, because once families really feel empowered, they know what to ask for when they go back to their child's school. And, as long as it's okay with the family and they feel comfortable sharing that with us, it's never a requirement. But if they feel comfortable sharing that with us, of course, it all the better allows us to direct, what we do next.
That is so awesome. And yeah, I love empowering families. That's like my whole mission statement, and why I do these shows and why I do my YouTube channel with all my videos is that parents, they're their best advocate for their children.
And they don't know what their rights are, and the school's not going to advertise it, right?
Exactly. And I don't know if you know.
They really do hold a lot of power, in terms of advocating for their child. And sometimes it takes some confidence and understanding of how the system works, which we're happy to sort of advise and facilitate with them. And, whatever we can do essentially to help a family feel confident in navigating what those next steps are, even if it's going through the process totally exclusive of including their child's school, and just wanting to do this privately, which is, it's up to them. This is a document that the parent may choose never to show to a school, and this is something that they just want for themselves. That's their choice. Where that difference is that if they get evaluated through a school district, again, the goal there is to just qualify that child for services or disqualify them, and it follows them in terms of their record. And that's just something that a parent has to choose and decide. But more often than not, they just don't know that going into these situations. So we just try to really educate what they can expect and what they're entitled to as much as we can.
That is so awesome and wonderful. And I know I had another question and I just disappeared. I'm so excited. I have to tell you, when I met Blakely, I was so excited to hear about this because I think we have similar backgrounds. I'm a former teacher also before law school.
Yes,
And just
totally.
and totally like that it's about helping the families, getting the children what they need and deserve.
And one thing too that I'll really highlight, and I think this is actually one of the pieces that kind of really played into my journey with Parallel, is the aspect that we're able to have students be evaluated in the comfort of their home. That is something that is like completely understated in my opinion, because I actually came across Parallel kind of coincidentally. They reached out to me and shared a little bit about their services. But I had actually had a student at the time who had such debilitating anxiety that even coming to school every single day was a challenge. And his family had been trying, we had that discussion of him being evaluated because we really just needed to know more about his learning profile. We were really kind of exhausting our resources at the school. And this had started in, third and fourth grade. This was a sixth grader now at the time period I'm just referring to. And when I heard that these were virtual services and kind of ran it by the family, they were like, I actually think that we can do this. And the student agreed, and we did it. Actually, I was able to facilitate it in my classroom, which was one of the safe spaces for him at the school. And within, I would say like a month and a half, we had the documentation that we had spent 3 or 4 years trying to obtain. And it was just groundbreaking to me. And really what it was that he did not feel comfortable even at school sometimes, let alone would they be able to get their child to a clinic knowing that his performance is going to be tested with someone who feels totally unfamiliar to him, no matter how warm they are or whatnot. So I think there's something also to say that this is a really good fit for some kiddos who struggle with that performance anxiety, or where families might be really nervous about the impact of getting their child evaluated by bringing them to a clinician's office. This kind of eliminates that stress a little bit. Not fully, kids, maybe a little bit nervous, but I will say I've never heard in my entire career a parent tell me that their kid enjoyed their testing sessions, and yet that's the feedback that we've been getting recently. And I have to say, like, there's nothing that feels better than that when you have parents say, "Oh, my child was upset that their testing was over," and I was like,
"Okay."
Well, you hear something new all the time, and that's something that, like, I would love to just pin on a wall and just, really consider that a major accomplishment for us.
That is. And I'm assuming you do. I think you said that you do a family meeting before the testing starts so that the child feels comfortable with you and sees the interaction, or whoever the tester would be.
Well, the clinical interview is really with the clinical psychologist. So the point for that, the child's attendance there, is for the clinical psychologist to be able to ask them questions if they feel needed. And again, it really kind of depends on their age. Children under the age of 12 don't typically join because it allows for the parents to be a little bit more authentic in sharing the information without compromising, the child's self-esteem and anything, with that sort. When it comes to the psychometrist, so again, the psychometrist is the one who's going to be doing the actual testing, but they're incredible at building rapport with these students right away. And one of the things they've shared with me that has been helpful to them is that, a lot of times the kids are set up in their room. They can see things on the wall. It allows them a little bit of an ability to really connect with them right away by kind of, pointing things out, noticing what their interests are. And really ensuring that they feel comfortable through the testing process. They really do an amazing job connecting with our children and our students first. That's important to them from the very beginning. And again, even when it comes to the testing piece, if they notice that a child's really struggling with the time frame of our testing, which is typically about 2 hours, we don't schedule any longer than that for a testing session. Our psychometrist will say, I think we need to adjust this for these kiddos. They don't want them to be, stressed. They don't want them to be struggling through the process. They're really looking out for them and ensuring that we're getting valid results without compromising the child's experience.
That is so wonderful. And I know I'm watching the clock because I know you have other commitments and I don't want to take too much of your time. Is there any, like in wrapping up, is there anything else you want to share with our audience about you guys or how they can contact you?
Yeah, so they can reach out. If you go to our website, they're easily able to navigate and set up a consultation with one of our care specialists. I always recommend starting there because they're really helpful in helping navigate what the next steps are and really explaining the process a little bit further. Of course, anybody can feel free to reach out to me. Again, with my background, I'm happy to also kind of give some insight as to what choices, families have within our programming. I guess another thing that I'd love to share too that I think is so important is the efficiency piece. So in a lot of cases when, families go through an evaluation, whether it's through a school district or privately, they're looking at, anywhere from 4 to 6 months before even getting those results. And that's pre-COVID. So I imagine right now that wait time is a lot longer.
Yeah.
And sometimes time is everything for a child. So our turnaround times, a family, depending on their scheduling, we can, basically facilitate the entire process in anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow. Getting on the calendar to report?
Yeah.
Wow. That's huge. Because I know for us, private psychologists are scheduling 2 to 3 months out minimum.
Exactly.
Yeah,
minimum. And then the report, delivery and, scheduling that feedback session can also take a lot of time. And that really, that can really impact a child's entire school year. I mean, that's like an entire
100%.
school year that child could be missing out on accommodations or, any type of intervention services that could have supported them throughout the way. So I'll say that that's just something that we're incredibly proud of. And again, a benefit of utilizing the parallel programming for that.
Yeah. Definitely. That I love to hear that because that's so important because I have a long list of clients that are trying to get in for evaluations.
Exactly. And then we really pride ourselves in ensuring that families get these answers as quickly as they can.
And I'm assuming consultations are free?
Consultations are free. Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Maggie, so much for being on our show. I loved learning more about you guys. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. All of our information to reach out to me or to Maggie and Parallel Learning will be in the show notes below. And thank you so much for listening. See you soon.
Thank you so much for
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.